Hi, honors chemistry students. Welcome to your first lab of the year, one of our favorite labs that we do, the Unknown Powders Lab. We're going to start with a quick review of some of the things that you should remember from 8th grade physical science. And that has to do with physical and chemical properties that can be used to identify different samples of matter. Recall that physical properties can be observed without changing the chemical nature of the substance. And examples of that include things like the color of it, the texture of it, the density of it, at what point it will boil or change from a liquid to a gas, etc. So melting of paraffin wax, which I can see on the image on the left, when I do that, I have observed the temperature at which it will melt, but I still have paraffin wax. I haven't changed the identity of my sample of matter. Likewise, with the image on the right, where I'm boiling water, I still have the molecule H2O, two hydrogens connected to one oxygen, but I've gone from the liquid to the gaseous state. So both melting and freezing or boiling point or melting point are all physical properties. Chemical properties, on the other hand, in order to observe or measure those properties, I often do change the chemical nature of the sample that I'm observing. So for example, in the image on the left, if I want to know whether a certain metal will oxidize, I can see that iron will rust or react with oxygen, and I have iron oxide now. I no longer have iron, whereas chromium will not react or oxidize. That's a chemical property of those metals. Also remember from your physical science course that when I combine two or more substances where they retain their physical properties, I have a mixture. I haven't combined them in such a way that they chemically reacted to make a new substance, and I can still pick out those individual physical and chemical properties of the individual components of a mixture. So for example, salt water is a mixture because I can easily boil off or separate the water and leave the salt behind. So let's talk a little bit about the purpose and procedures for the Unknown Powders Lab. You're going to start by making observations of 5 different powders, and we're always just going to refer to the powders as powders A through E. At this point in time, we don't care what the actual chemical identity of that different powder is. We're going to take all the physical and chemical properties of each of the individual powders, organize it into a big data table, and then your teacher's going to give you an unknown mixture that contains anywhere from 2 of those powders to all 5 of the powders. And your goal is to find that each powder, when you're observing them initially, that each of those powders has something very distinctive about it that I could use to determine if it was present in my unknown mixture or not. So we're going to start out by looking at physical properties. Each of your powders is going to be present in a film canister like this. They're all labeled A through E. I'm going to take a small micro spatula from my lab kit, and I'm going to take a small amount of that powder and spread it out on a piece of black poster board in a nice thin layer so I can observe things like its color and its texture and its particle size. There will be a little hand lens to help you do that. Next, we're going to observe the chemical properties, and for this we're going to use a well plate. For example, using my little micro spatula again, I can take a small amount of powder A and put a little bit in each of the 4 wells, 1 through 4, and then I have 4 different liquids. Again, I don't care what that liquid is, we're just going to refer to them as liquids 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I can react a little bit of powder A with liquid 1, stir it up with my stir stick, a little bit of powder A with liquid 2, powder A with liquid 3, powder A with liquid 4. And I'm looking for evidence of a chemical reaction, things like bubbling or fizzing or a gas forms or color changes or it appears that the new substance formed, and record those observations. I can then repeat that procedure with powders B, C, D, and E, again testing each of them with each of the 4 liquids, looking for something distinctive that happens between a different powder and a different liquid that I could use to identify if that powder was in my unknown. The final chemical test we do will be a burn test, and your teacher will demonstrate this for you, but you'll put a thin layer of each powder on a metal can lid, hold that can lid over the Bunsen burner, and look for evidence of some type of chemical reaction, or does that powder burn or combust in some way, and exactly what happens when we do that. As I mentioned, all of that data will be organized into a data table in the first part of the lab, so that if I know a lot of information about the physical and chemical properties of each powder as an individual powder, hopefully I can find a distinctive property that will let me know if that powder is in my unknown. For example, let's say that when I combine powder A with liquid 1, it turns blue. And when I take my unknown mixture and put a little bit of liquid 1 with my unknown and it turns blue, that's pretty good evidence to support the claim that powder A is in my unknown. Good luck with your pre-lab. See you in lab.